that sort of brings us into, I guess, talking about the new way we're all working, and traditional way of working with people, clock in, clock out, which I guess kind of started in the Industrial Revolution a few hundred years ago. That concept around managing via accountables and deliverables, as opposed to time and attendance, really. So can you talk a bit around your philosophies of that?
Yeah, so in a university environment, in a university environment, there's going to be a broad range of people who are working, and therefore you've got to be able to be flexible enough to accommodate lots and lots of different types of learner and lots of worker and lots of different types of styles. I understand in some organizations that they may have a preferred way of working, and they may have organized themselves around that, and that might have been easier to do. I think the big change that's happened during this COVID period is that we've had to rely on the generosity of people to take us into their home. They have brought us into their lives, and we've seen everything. There are so many films of different parts of people's lives invading. I'm sitting here waiting for 2 puppies to start barking at any point, which I'm hoping they won't necessarily do. So I think there are always going to be environments where the focus on the task is necessary. You need to know where people are, you need to know what they're doing, how they're doing it, quality assuring that, etc. But where we can show flexibility for employees, and where we can show an ability to flex around the lives that people have got, we should consider that. And I know at Monash University, that's what we've done. Where we can show flexibility, we've committed that we will show flexibility in the future.
Yeah, someone said to me, have we been working from home or living at work in the last year or so? And it kind of really resonated with me. I thought,
I agree. I agree. And I think if you think about it, a year ago, if someone was sitting on a Zoom like this at home and their child or their dog or someone else walked in, their first moment would be devastating. The second moment is they would assume it was going to happen. And I mean, I've sat in executive committee meetings at Monash with my puppy on the desk because it was the only way to keep them quiet. And everyone has had to adjust.
Yeah, fantastic. What sort of dog have you got, by the way?
I've got 2 Cavalier King Charleses. So
we got a cavoodle in lockdown.
Yeah. So I've got a cavoodle, but with one that sheds hair, is the way I put it.
Got it. No problem. I was reading something you commented on in 2016, Ken, that you were talking about 2016 being a particularly pivotal year in global events. Can you elaborate on this, please?
Yeah, I suppose the reason why it was pivotal, on a personal level, I was going through a big transition. I made a decision to leave an employer after a long period of time, and also was making a decision to leave country. So maybe I was a bit more receptive to what was happening in the world. But if you think about 2016, it was the year that Donald Trump got elected. It was the year that the UK voted for Brexit. We also had the Paris Climate Change Agreement. There was a spate of terrorist attacks that were happening in mainland Europe in different places. In Australia, there was a very vociferous debate about marriage equality going on. And if you think about that time, I think there was a general view portrayed in a lot of areas that Trump would not get elected. So there was almost a presumption that Trump would not get elected. There was almost a presumption that Brexit wouldn't happen. And then people who thought they were part of the majority opinion or with the dominant view found themselves in a completely different position. So I think that it was a time where some orthodoxies that people had assumed were dominant and wrongly assumed were dominant. These things that had happened in terms of the emergence of the support for Donald Trump and the emergence of support for Brexit had been visible for many years, but I don't think they'd ever been accepted as being mainstream. And then suddenly in 2016, in different parts of the world, people found themselves in a situation where they had to do that. And I think that's created a basis on which people have had to really reconsider and rethink what's happening in their country, what matters in their country, and also what it means for them in terms of what the views they hold and the decisions they take. I certainly found it a very grounding year in terms of what it really encouraged me to rethink what I really understood was important.
Yeah. And I think it's caused, it's exposed a lot of divisions in society, really. And then, of course, last year with, COVID, which we all know about, and the Black Lives Matters movement as well. One of my concerns that I see is that coming through the other side, I mean, you have to look at vaccinations. I mean, vaccinations are a global issue, not a national issue, right? But we've been forced to close all our borders. None of us are traveling anymore, which is just a crazy thing. If I said to you, 18 months ago, you're not going to be able to fly, you wouldn't get your head around it. And now one of my concerns is we might result in a lot more sort of nationalistic type behaviour going forwards.
Yeah, I think that's the risk of that is genuinely true. And I was watching the headlines today where there seems to be some glee that Scotland has announced some relaxing of restrictions in the UK, and then Boris Johnson is saying that he can't do that within England and won't do that within England. I think the risk is to the citizen and how they are able to take a steer from those in authority. People want clarity in the time of a crisis. They don't want competing political interests to be in play. And then if I think about it through another lens, I've got a friend called David who's lives in Uganda. He's a Ugandan. And whilst everyone else is worrying about the access to vaccines as a presumption, they assume they're coming. Having a conversation with him, he just doesn't even know, are they coming? So we've got huge swathes of disadvantaged communities that actually don't have the luxury of some of the conversations that we're having. We're assuming that we will get a vaccine. We'll assume when we get a vaccine. I think we do need to return, and I know through the COVAX program that is what we're trying to do. We do need to return to a point where when it's something that affects society so materially as COVID has done, that we work collectively in order to make sure that we get as many people back to some degree of normality as quickly as we can.
And of course, on the subject of vaccines, universities have never been more front and central in their, vaccine development plans. I mean, you've got the Oxford University, AstraZeneca, and interested. You must be proud to see how the educational establishments and the R&D, parts within them have responded to the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, that's been really rewarding and heartening to see, not only in vaccines. Vaccines have been obviously essential, and you'll see that continue over the years ahead. There are teams all over the world that are working out what happens next with these vaccines, and you'll see more of that come through Australia as well as you're seeing in other parts of the world. You've seen it in medical technology, the changes to the way PPE's been developed, also just the whole issue about how you track and sequence who's had a vaccine, what happens, the big data that sits behind that has been really closely connected to universities. And at the moment, there's a question being raised. The Minister Tudge, the Minister for Education in Australia, has recently put out a consultation paper on commercialization and translation of university research. And I think it's fantastic that we can point to really strong, tangible examples of where that research is being translated. But obviously we want to do even more of that. And that's what all universities are committed to doing with their partners over the years ahead.
Amazing. And so that's something that takes up a fair bit of your time at Monash, and working with, the R&D and the, working with partners.
Yeah, so we've a combination of things. You mentioned before, I'm on the board of BioCurate. That was and is a company that was set up by both Monash University and the University of Melbourne to accelerate the translation of drugs into the market. So working with industry and working with funders so that we can take things that were developed within laboratories and universities and accelerate how we get them into patients and make their lives better. But we're doing that right across the board, whether it's supporting the transition to net zero so that we're having a better impact and a safer impact on the world, whether we're looking at the future of food, the future of agriculture, also in really tangible policy areas. So people often look at commercialization through products. So they look at products and services, but you've also got to think about policies have a big effect on people. So we've got a Centre for Gender and Family Violence that has been working really hard through COVID to expose quickly what are the additional risks that people at risk are facing and what are the actions that can be taken. The one point I would say, and I can't let this bit go without saying it, is that a lot of the translation we're able to do today is because of research that's been invested in over many years. So as well as focusing on translation, we've also got to make sure we continue to invest in fundamental discovery research, because it's that which then enables us to take these things and translate them out into society.